Warm greetings, everyone. On behalf of W4W Foundation, a think tank instituted as Citizens Collective, we welcome you to another session of Wednesdays for Water. The conversation today is on listening to the fragile, reflections from the Western Ghats. Apart from the conversation today, we are also delighted to inform you that we are also celebrating today the 350th water conversation through this online open repository from W4W. We are extremely proud and also grateful to all our speakers in the past, as well as all the participants who have really supported and encouraged us to continue this conversation, as we strongly believe at W4W that conversations are crucial for conservation in case of water. On that line, the objective of Wednesdays for Water is to engage in conversations with water experts, grassroots practitioners, policymakers, and youth to explore the complex intertwined issues associated with water and possible solutions. The Wednesdays for Water since then has expanded to have more activities like the online Friday Waters and the online Monday Munching with Women for Water. Besides organizing on-site water workshops, water walks and talks, seminars, special courses, and conference panels to continue the water conversation in various possible ways. Do visit our website www.w4w.in for more details. My name is Mansee Bal Bhargava, and I am the host for the session today from W4W and the Water Resource Council of the Women's Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. In today's session, listening to the fragile, reflections from the Western Ghats, and we all know how sensitive the issue is when we talk about Western Ghats, but we have to listen to more than when we talk about only the human development, and that's why we have some wonderful speakers, and also I am very happy to welcome them back on our show. And we have Madhuri Mandava, Naren Sreenivasan as speakers, and Khushbu Birawat as discussant for today. First of all, thank you so much, all three of you, and also welcome back to the session. I hope you enjoyed the last time, as you will also enjoy today. I am not going to talk much about the Western Ghats because it's something which we all have to biodiversity hotspots in the country. And therefore, we have these wonderful speakers who have dedicated their life. I will invite first Madhuri Mandava before I really give her the space. It's a delight to actually introduce her. Madhuri Mandava is an electronics and communication engineer with an MSc in electrical engineering from Penn State. Her journey towards sustainable living began more than 2 decades ago when she came across the book Affluenza, the All-Consuming Epidemic. It has shifted something in her, as she writes, and she started questioning her own habits, impacts, and began trying to reduce her waste footprint and live more consciously. Since then, she has traveled a lot. I know her work, and also she has moved to Bangalore to deepen her journey and paying close attention to how people live, how we live in city, and how disconnected we are. So over the years, they have formed this learning from the land, from the people, and from the rivers, and have formed Pani.earth, a platform that is now 3 years old, and they are really working through that. So I will now invite Madhuri to make her presentation and argument on the subject, and then I will invite Naren for the second speaker's presentation. Thank you, Madhuri, and over to you.
Thank you, Mansee. Just a second. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah. Just a second. Okay. Yeah. So good evening, everyone. I actually wanted to start off with this image of Netravati River flowing in full spate. This was taken last year when we were on a field trip. This is the excess water that the governments and engineers and many of them saw and said, let's start a project to divert this excess water to Bangalore and surrounding areas. So I wanted to hold the space to acknowledge that we mostly see rivers as just this water that's flowing here, something that we can extract, divert, and control. But rivers are so much more. I think I want to start this presentation with that acknowledgement that rivers are living ecosystems connecting forests, floodplains, fish, birds, people, and all the other beings that are part of this web of life. Um, Recently, we got introduced to the world of, as we are learning the world of macroinvertebrates, something that we don't often see in rivers, which is so important for the whole web of life. So at Pani.earth Foundation, we are trying to reclaim this deeper understanding of rivers, that they're not just pipelines or channels of water, but living systems we have largely lost connection with. And if we want to revive our rivers, we must first revive our relationship with them, understand that they're more than just water. So this is the initiative that, the Fur Rivers dot, sorry, one second. Yeah, the Fur Rivers dot life that we have started, where we are saying, because rivers are more than water and they support life. So this is the new initiative that we started under Pani.earth Foundation. But our journey started with this initiative, Pani.earth, where um, we have worked with polluted, neglected rivers of the city, which led to Pani.earth, where this work is mainly focused on rivers of Bengaluru. We have shared maps, data, insights, whatever we are learning as we go along. At Pani.earth, our work typically begins with a simple question: what is the river trying to tell us? To listen, we gather knowledge from many places, whether it's government records, scientific studies, satellite images, people like Naren and many activists that we meet on the ground working for the wildlife there, and voices from the ground, which is the farmers and many more who live by the rivers. Um, so this is, a culmination of our work, where we, bring all of this together, and that's what is our Pani.earth portal. We also, learn with primary research on ground, where we try to test the water and sediment samples of the Arkavati River, which is a river flowing through Bangalore, and try and understand what is in the river. We also did a study with Professor Subodh Sharma that you can see here, where we tried to understand, that what are the macroinvertebrates that are there in the river when the river looks clean at some places visibly, but what is missing there is why is life not able to thrive? Then, we do a lot of that on ground research. We're also trying to work with NGT to push for better monitoring, because the current National Water Quality Monitoring Program is just a report card which just says A, B, C, D, E, but nothing beyond that. And we need a more robust mechanism if we want to even look at protecting our rivers. We this year have focused also on a lot of outreach, because we've understood that rivers, we put out a lot of data, but that can't be protected by data alone. Rivers, they will be protected when people begin to care. So how do we make them care? Because they're forgotten, dismissed as drains in the urban setting. So we have something called By the River, which we do every second Saturday of the month, where we meet and acknowledge and reimagine what she could be again. So listening to the fragile. So this is the image, of Agumbe Reserve, where from the Western Ghats. So, though our journey started with polluted and neglected rivers of the city, when you start asking, saying, so trying to get deeper, you immediately get to the upstream, which is the Western Ghats, the source of all peninsular rivers, be it the Krishna, the Godavari, or the heavily dependent, the Kaveri that we depend on, Bangalore. So these mountains mostly are like scenic backdrops or hiking spots for Bangaloreans, but they're much more than that. They're monsoon makers, water holders, climate balancers, and much more. And so they're also home to the most diverse freshwater ecosystems. I'm still like, today when we come here and do this presentation, we are not doing as experts. We're doing as citizens concerned and committed about freshwater ecosystems, and sharing the little learning that we have on ground and from different reports that we gather, and try and understand what's happening with the Western Ghats. So when we say the fragile, we are representing not the elephants and the tigers, but the lesser known freshwater, beings that are there. Um, so this is the tiny dragonfly, which the IUCN report actually talked about this particular one actually being in a vulnerable state in the Western Ghats. Um Freshwater many species which are there in the Western Ghats are in a pretty critical state according to the IUCN study report, which was released very recently. Um, so many may ask, that, okay, a tiny dragonfly, what if, it disappears? How does it matter? It depends on clean flowing forest streams to survive. When it disappears, it's giving you a warning sign that something is not right with the river ecosystems. We may never notice that, this dragonfly vanishes, but when the last one is gone, we will know the impact because our river ecosystems will collapse. Our food ecosystems are going to collapse because we depend on all of these insects and the web of life for pollination, for several other things that happen. So listening to the fragile means, hearing these warning signs. There are many reports of, there are many such warning signs, given by people who work on the ground, like Naren, to, we know of many other people who really focus on certain species that are out there, which are struggling to survive with all the different interventions that we bring in. But we happen to not listen to this fragile, and we think we can engineer this entire ecosystem to our advantage and extract it more and more. So this slide shows you the power projects in the Western Ghats, and this is just focusing on Karnataka. If you look at Maharashtra and other states, I'm sure these numbers are going to be in thousands of more megawatts. But this shows you what is in the Kali River Basin, the Krishna River Basin, the Sharavati, the Netravati, Kaveri Basin, where this data was put together from 2023-2024 CREDL, Karnataka Renewable Energy Development Limited database. And so what we found was, and so the numbers can be much more, but as of 2023-24, 4.5 gigawatts, if you take the hydropower and nuclear power, the currently operational, and we are looking at more 1.4 gigawatts of nuclear power at the Kaiga, which is in the only nuclear power plant in ecologically biodiversity hotspot. It's the only one in the entire world where you have a nuclear power plant in a biodiversity hotspot. So we look at almost like 5.98 gigawatts of power. And this is definitely on the lower side because there are many more SHPs that have been installed or been commissioned, the last year also. And then we are talking about a 2000 megawatt Sharavati pump storage, in this area, saying we need more power. I think the question, 1 second, sorry. Yeah, so the question that, we have to ask ourselves is that these hydropower and nuclear power projects, right? Yes, there's the whole development versus ecology debate that we talk about. But these fragment habitats, right? These isolate patches of forest, disrupt river flows, and we cannot see the extent of destruction that we cause with these things. And what happens is that we only talk about power in megawatts, but we never look at the powerless that we have left in return, which are these beings which don't have voices. And we keep talking about more and more and more such projects, saying Bangalore is generating this much GDP for Karnataka, and so it deserves more power, it provides more jobs. So we are looking at growth which is not sustainable at the cost of our fragile ecosystems. This is again Bangalore's water, the thirst, that unquenchable thirst that we have. So this is Bangalore, and right now we take water from this point near Shivana Samudra, Shiva Anikat, which is about 100 kilometers away, and we pump upstream. And it's infamous story about Bangalore's unsustainable Kaveri water supply. But we are talking about now water from Yettinhole, 200 plus kilometers away. And if you see, anybody, whether, whether we acknowledge it or not, it is coming, the pipelines, the whole destruction. It's not just about that one pipe, right? The whole activity causes so much disruption to bring water to the Western Ghats and to Bangalore. And then we have spent 22,000 crores. And the irony is that not even a drop of water has made its way to Bangalore. Scientists have warned that you don't have enough water, but we don't listen to the science. We don't listen to the landslides. We don't listen to the fragile, the warnings that come from this fragile ecosystem. So when will we start listening to the fragile? Because our lives depend on that. So this is, Netravati diverted in pipelines over Hemavati River. One second, sorry. So rivers, have just boiled down to mere pipelines. They talk about the whole engineering marvel of trying to bring water from far away, but do we realize that there are like many eggs in there, the frogs, the fish, even the soil, the silt that the rivers carry cannot be just transported from one place to another like pipelines. So the concern that we wanted to share is that um, we kind of start moving away from, like, you're hearing the news about Bangalore, right? It's in floods right now. We have so much water. Rishabhavati, I'm away from Bangalore, but I got images of Rishabhavati flowing in full spate, right? So this is the cycle that continues, that every time it rains, we just let the water gush away and then keep reaching out for farther and farther waters from the fragile ecosystems. So when will we start listening to the fragile? This is, like the ESA notification. So Western Ghats, the one frail attempt to protect it was, after all the protected areas that we have, which are like patchy segments, we also have, an attempt to declare a lot of the area as an environmentally sensitive area with certain restrictions. This is one of the restrictions where the recent draft talked about new and expansion projects, right? You can build up to 20,000 square meters. What does this translate to? It translates to, Rashtrapati Bhavan size construction. And even this is being resisted by our Karnataka government, by misinformation being spread saying that, locals cannot build their houses, which are not going to be the size of Rashtrapati Bhavan. Yes, homestays and, tourism will be, constrained, but misinformation is being spread to actually say, do not get an ESA declared, otherwise a lot of your local life is going to be disrupted. And hence what do we leave in return is this entire fragile ecosystem to be continuously uh, hampered in many ways, disrupted in many ways, with unregulated tourism, drinking water projects, and much more. So I think I want to end this with, handing it over to Naren, who will share more things on ground, but with a note saying what we choose to hear now will shape what remains tomorrow. If we do not listen to the fragile, we are actually at risk, because the biodiversity, I think, we have gone through these many cycles, but if we want a survival to be there, we depend on them. And I think it's high time we recognize that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madhuri. Thank you so much. And a big takeaway for me from this is, if we are actually not listening to fellow human beings, listening to the biodiversity still remains far. And then we are talking about listening to water and land, which is soil. Unfortunately, I'm always wondering why people call it land all the time and not soil, which also has life and the least studied, I will say, ecosystem on Earth, by the way. So yes, we have a lot to discuss, and I also wish to tell all our participants here that W4W, since its formation, is only listening. So at least we have listeners. And I am very privileged myself personally that out of the 350 sessions we have conducted so far, I have attended 346 sessions sitting here. So wow. I am listening, but maybe I am not impactful. I am not on the decision making scene. But we want to learn from Naren more what exactly we want to listen, what should we listen, And how can we, even as humans, listen to each other? And then we will learn the art of listening to the ecosystem, probably. But before I invite you, Naren, welcome back once again. I would like to put on record a brief bio from you. Naren Sreenivasan is a conservation biologist with Wildlife Association of South India, which is WASI, a not-for-profit based out of Bangalore. He works on ecological research and outreach efforts in the Kaveri River Basin, with a special focus on social and ecological dynamics of the freshwater ecosystems. A passionate recreational angler himself, Naren has spent decades working alongside India's angling community, and today he will be sharing his thoughts and observations on the aquatic ecology of Kaveri River. Naren, you heard Madhuri, and for somewhere I was also thinking about when we talk about life below the water and life on land. We are also talking about SDG 14 and 15 in some way or the other. So thank you so much, Naren. Over to you. The space is yours.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen. Yeah. Is my screen up?
Yes.
Great. Hi, everyone. This is Naren here. Thank you, Madhuri, for that. I think I'm going to try and, first of all, I love this theme, listening to the fragile. This is something that I end up doing a lot in my work because I work on rivers and I work with aquatic animals. And many of that time you can't see these animals. So you kind of have to, well, it's not listening like how you would listen to a human being, but you need to perceive in a way, right? So you try and visualize what these animals are up to. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So we will touch on how we can listen to a river ecosystem. So I'm going to focus a little bit on Kaveri because I think there's a lot that's happening in this river basin currently. So there are dams being planned. There are dams that have been built over the years. I think currently it's about 101 odd dams and barrages that are present across the basin. So that's quite a bit of utilization on freshwater resources. Right? But this is nothing new to the Kaveri Basin. So the first project, and this is quite an interesting story, Madhuri had mentioned the Shivasamudram area where we get when I say our Bangalore's water supply comes from. And that is also the site of the Sheshadri Iyer power station, which is a hydroelectric power station that was set up in the late 1800s. And it was primarily set up to supply the Kolar goldfields with electricity. And back then, Shivasamudram was an inaccessible place, right? So you couldn't go there. There were tigers, leopards, elephants, all of this going on. And M. Vishveshwaraya was the engineer in charge, and the British called his bluff on it. They said, it's too difficult. The terrain is too rugged. You won't be able to do it. But he was persistent. He went to the Maharaja. He got the resources and the money for it and built this power station, which is one of the oldest in South Asia. So there's a lot of history, and this was in 1902 they inaugurated the power station. So it's about over 100 years now. So this basin has been put through a lot, right? And I study the animals that have lived in this river basin, 100 years ago through reports that the scientists have published and what is there today. And all I can say is this ecosystem is extremely resilient. And like what Madhuri said, and there is a point where ecosystems collapse, right? There's a threshold. We call it a tipping point in ecology. Think of it as a rubber band. You stretch that rubber band, its characteristics change. It won't break, but until a certain point. Once you go past that point, it breaks, and that, in an ecosystem's perspective, it is irreversible. So we definitely need to listen to the fragile, and that's what we do at WASI. So I work with a society, essentially. So there are 400 odd members in this society from all walks of life. And what I love about this society is that they are invested in freshwater ecology, and they have been so for the last 50 years. So it's a great space for me to, as a scientist as well, to conduct a lot of my work. So moving into it, this large image that you see on the right is essentially a graph of the Earth's surface, right? And what I want to touch upon here is how fragile freshwater ecosystems actually are. So if you look at this graph, we all learned in school that 75% of the Earth's surface is covered in water. 25% is all land or Mansee soil. And but what we don't pay attention to is the distribution of freshwater bodies, right? That accounts for just 0.75% of the entire Earth's surface. And that automatically will tell you that this is incredibly fragile, right? Because it's not as large as your even a desert ecosystem, which is spread across large swathes of land. It's a very, very limited resource. And it's not only used by humans, it's also this image, the painting that you see towards the left of your screen is an artist's impression of what you see in the Amazon. And we've all heard about how incredible the Amazon jungle is and how much diversity there is. But when I look at and study this painting, I see a lot of similarities with what we have in India. We have freshwater dolphins, we have crocodiles, we have turtles, we have close to 1,000 species of freshwater or fresh and marine species of fish, mangroves, all of this in this country. And a lot of this diversity, especially when it comes to fish, live in this 0.75%, right? So this is crucial because everybody needs fresh water, from humans all the way to animals. And this is something that we cannot take for granted any longer. And to talk about diversity, we're still discovering what's happening underwater because, as you can imagine, when you go stand by a river, you can see the river, you can see how beautiful it is around you, like picture behind me. But you can't see what's happening underwater, right? This is the world's largest cave fish that was described only last year, right? And it's a massive species and it's lived completely underground and it's even lost its eyes, right? Because they just rely completely on their senses now. So just fantastic discoveries like this coming out of India and our freshwater ecosystems. So we still have a lot to learn from this space. And the take-home message from this screen, first of all, this is the wonderful image that I borrowed from a colleague. And it's basically puts all the sub-basins across the country in different colors, right? And the take-home message from this, apart from it being a fantastic, beautiful map, the take-home message from this is endemism, right? Which stems from the word endemic, which means an animal belongs to a certain region and to that region only. And in freshwater ecology, endemism is extremely high, right? Some parts of the Western Ghats, it goes up to 45% to anywhere between 45 to even 60 and 80% sometimes, which means that 60 or 80% of all the fish or aquatic animals found in that river basin are found nowhere else in the world. Extremely high. And why this is because of the way water behaves, right? Water always flows from higher elevation to lower elevation. It's governed by gravity. And if you take the Western Ghats, for example, a mountain range, you have rivers that flow towards the east, rivers that flow towards the west, but they hardly ever meet. They hardly ever intermingle, right? Apart from maybe an extreme flood event where some of the capillaries up in the hill streams kind of flood into each other and just cross over the species. But essentially, all these river systems are separated from each other, isolated from each other, and that gives rise to speciation or diversity, and which is why we have so much endemism, right? And this is a really cool tool that I've learned over the last 10 years, and I think everybody can play around with this just to learn a little bit about what they call about the ecology of the river while you're sitting in front of your computer. It takes about 10 minutes to do. It's called a river long profile. And it's essentially a graph of the elevation profile of the river, right? And I thought I'd keep this in here just so that people can play around with it, in your free time. It helps you, kind of get into that river in a sense. So just from this graph, there are certain things that pop straight out to me, right? So one is that the river starts at an elevation of 900 meters. This is the Kaveri River, so it starts up in the Brahmagiri Wildlife Sanctuary. And it flows for about 800 kilometers till it reaches the sea, right? And you can see in the upper course, it's a gradual decline. The slope is quite gradual. We have rivers that come and meet it, tributary number 1, 2, and 3. That's the Harangi, Hemavati, and Lakshmatika, just before they meet the KRS Dam, right? And the KRS Dam is located at 800 meters. And this is odd, right? Because Bangalore's at 916 meters. And this is exactly what Madhuri was talking about. We're pumping water from that area uphill for about 100 kilometers. And this is all adding up to our, water bills, etc. But if we keep following this river profile, you see something change in the middle course. And this is where the river cascades off the Deccan Plateau. And you can see this massive cascade here. So you have the Shivasamudram waterfalls, the Hoknekal Falls, the Meghdadu Gorge, all these rapids and crazy fast water. And this gives rise to a whole bunch of microhabitats. So when you see this kind of profile on a river, you can automatically expect to find a lot of species in this place. And that's where I work right now. And that's what I'm going to talk about a little more. If you can see the video on your right, this is some of the animals, terrestrial, and then it migrates into aquatic as well. These are the kind of species that are supported by a river. It's not just fish, it's not just a crab, it's not a snail, it's not any of that. It's all of these animals that are dependent as an ecosystem on this one resource. You lose that river and you lose all of this wildlife, right? We all love to do. Now, the unfortunate thing is our interaction with wildlife is also just go for a safari. And my wife and I were recently looking up safaris, and each safari is about 3,500 rupees. It's crazy, right? But that's our only interaction with wildlife nowadays. So we need these rivers to be intact so that we maintain these ecosystems, right? So we have the Kaveri Basin is also home to the honey badger, which is quite a cool thing. So moving on, this is what the Kaveri would looks like. This is actually the site where the proposed Mekedatu Dam is going to be put up. In fact, it's in between those two hills right in front of you. But this is what I mean by microhabitats. So you have a chute that's flowing right underneath us right now. And then as we move up, you have these two major rapids that join each other. To the left of the screen, there are these pebble banks and shallower waters. Now, when you go stand by this river, you're not going to see it. You're just going to see a river flowing. But as an ecologist, I can tell you that each of these habitat types have their own species that live in them. And these species are extremely dependent on this habitat diversity. So if you build a dam, if you convert this entire river stretch into essentially a lake, you're going to lose a lot of the species. And this is not something that's new to us. We've done it across the basin and we've seen the results. So let's take a dive in. What does that underwater world look like? Look at this photograph. This was not taken in some exotic dive location. This was taken at the Brahmagiri Wildlife Sanctuary by one of my friends, Umir Mistry. He's an underwater photographer. And this is a photograph of Masya from the Bhimgarh Wildlife Sanctuary. Beautiful, isn't it? A different perspective, where a river starts from. You know, the source of a river. Normally, it'll be a temple that you go and see. But how about a perspective from within that spring, right? Tadpoles swimming around at the bottom. This is a photograph of a bullfrog diving under the surface. Again, when we stand on the outside, we just see the frog dive in, but then there's so much more happening underwater. There's a different world altogether. Look at the colors in this fish. How fantastic is that? I was in Kerala just last week. We were flopping around in a little pond by the side of the Bhavali River, and it had a whole bunch of these fish swimming around right beside us. This is another highly predatory fish, the burrel, and the master of camouflage, the tank gobies, right? Predators. Now it's the same thing that you see in terrestrial ecosystems. So I would equate this to say Russell's viper, right, which is perfectly camouflaged up in the terrestrial world. It's the same thing that's happening underwater. The same concept. 3 endangered species in one frame. This is the Nilgiri bar, all endemics. And this fish, some of you might recognize it. I'm sure if I take you to a market and show you a rohu, you'll be able to pick it out instantly. But this is a rohu in life. Beautiful, beautiful specimen. And then you have the species that traverse this continuum that exists between water and land. The crocodile, for example, over millennia, they've changed from being aquatic to, at one point, hunting completely on land. Now they've adapted back into an aquatic space. Microinvertebrates, like Madhuri had mentioned, snails as bioindicators, and the freshwater shrimp as bioindicators. So I'm showing you these photographs because we've spent a lot of time working with underwater photographers. And now underwater photographers are used to diving in visibility of 10 meters, 12 meters, in some of the most pristine oceans you see. We've taken them and asked them to jump into a river where the visibility is only maybe half a foot. And these are the kind of images that they've been able to come out with. A freshwater jellyfish, endemic to the Western Ghats, found nowhere else in the world. Beautiful specimen. So there is a lot of this diversity, right? So how do we bring it all together? Because each of these species have their own issues. Right? It's not, I mean, for us from the outside, we'll say the hydroelectric is a problem, water extraction is a problem. But each of these species are facing their own little issues. Now, we can't even fathom what's happening underwater. So it's practically impossible for us to study each species and figure out, some sort of a cumulative strategy. So what we do is we ride on what work has been done with the Bengal tiger, which is we use a flagship species. So the tiger, for example, we all know about tiger now. What many of you may not know about is that there are 50 tiger reserves that are declared across the country. That's about 75 to 80,000 square kilometers. And there are a whole bunch of animals that live in that space, right? And they're all, by virtue of it being a tiger reserve, are all receiving protection. So this is our tiger of the river, right? This is the humpback master, the Torama Devi. It's endemic to the Kaveri Basin, and it's the largest of its kind. Goes to about 54 kilograms, is the largest specimen that we've come across. And they are endemic, as I said, and critically endangered on the IUCN red list. So a lot of the research that we do, a lot of the conservation messaging that we do is centered around the species. So we have a gallery at the Regional Museum of Natural History in Mysore. Well, it just concluded, but over the last 3 years, we had a lot of the research work and information that we had from the species on there. And what is this information, right? Yeah, so this is a specimen, the last one we found. This is in the 29th of January, 2025, so this year, right? And so they're still around, the large henfish. This is in all likelihood a female. They're still around, they're still breeding, they're doing okay, but they are on the brink. So we cannot afford to lose these specimens for a couple of reasons. One is, in any ecosystem, when you look at extinction historically, it's always the largest animals that go first, right? And for you to lose the largest fish of its kind would be a shame, not only a shame, but a huge, huge red flag for the Kaveri River Basin. So this is the reason why WASI has invested a lot over the years on the species, trying to understand what its life cycle is like, and what its connections with humans are also. So one of the flagship programs that we've been working on is a radiotelemetry study. And this allows us to study this fish in its habitat. So we've tagged 13 fish and released them. This is all in the Kaveri Wildlife Sanctuary in the middle course of the basin. And we've got a team, 2 fishermen who have been trained in collecting data and following fish and tagging fish, all of this. And we've had about 25 to 40 volunteers working on this program. And we're out there every day trying to study what these fish are going through. I don't know if you can hear that, but all you hear is a beep. So that's the signal that we get from the fish, right? And when you say listening to the fragile, in my world, in the world of all these volunteers, for months on end, you're listening to the fragile is just a beep. That's all you hear. And from that beep, you need to try and figure out what that fish is doing, where it's going, all of this stuff. And, after some time, you get used to it. And you can tell when the fish is hunting. You can tell when the fish is distressed. There's a lot of information that comes out of it. And of course, while you're on the river 24 hours, you see a lot of stuff. This team that the photograph of the volunteers in the center, just 2 months ago, they saw for the first time a crocodile catching a wild dog and eating it. So these kind of things are all coming up, right? When you spend more time on a river, you get to see a lot of stuff. So I can go on and on about this, but I will focus on just one specimen. This is a 24-kilogram humpback marcia, and we named her, she's a female, we named her Mara after tree, because when we did catch her, she got, tangled up in a tree, and it took us 15, 20 minutes to get her out of there. So Mara was her name. And we tracked Mara for 6 months, right? And it's very interesting what happened here. So the last summer was an extreme drought year, right? One of the worst that we've seen. And the river was in a terrible condition. Now, we don't hear about this because we are measuring water flow from Biligundlu, from monitoring stations, from where water is pumped to Bangalore, how much water is going. We don't measure it from an ecological perspective, which is very dangerous. And I've seen this firsthand last year. What we noticed was the river stopped flowing, number one. Yeah, the water temperature spiked. Our water temperature shouldn't cross 30 degrees, but ours was at 32, 33 degrees. Extremely high. Oxygen levels were tanking. There were hundreds and thousands of fish accumulated on the surface of the river. And I was so worried because we had just tagged Mara, and I was so sure she wasn't going to make it through the summer. But she was resilient. She made it through. And 6 months later, I don't know if you guys recall, but in June or July, there was a lot of pressure from Tamil Nadu to release water into from the KRS and Kabani dams. And our deputy chief minister was in the news for it. And sorry, oh, did I just close my screen? Sorry, that was my last slide. I'm just going to share it again. Yeah. So our deputy chief minister was on the news, and because he had released water, right? And over 2 days, they had released this huge amount of water that flowed through this area where Mara was living. That's the Galibori area. That's her safe haven during the summer, right? The deep pool. Now, what happened was almost instantly she reacted to that, because migratory fish of this nature, fish like this, they migrate upstream when the monsoon flow arrives. Now, Mara, being a fish, thought that this was the monsoon flow. So she migrated upstream and we lost her. We couldn't find her for 5 weeks. We searched 40 kilometers of river, walking up and down looking for her. We just couldn't find her. And then finally, after 5 weeks, we found her about 3 or 4 kilometers upriver of where upriver of her safe spot. And unfortunately, the signal was from just one spot. So you can see the picture on the bottom left. We took our telemetry devices with goggles, went and retrieved the transmitter from the bottom of the river. And unfortunately, we gathered that she died. And the reason for this is because she got trapped in a shallow pool. Now, what would happen in a normal monsoon year is that that water level that triggered this migration would reduce over 2 or 3 months slowly. And this allows fish to make their way back into deeper pools. What happened in this case is, because of our political pressures, we released water and 2 days later closed the dam gates abruptly. Water level dropped way too quickly, and Mara got trapped in this pool. Now, these are the kind of stories that are coming out from the work we do. And when we say listening to the fragile, this is how fragile it is. That fish is probably anywhere between 10 to 15 years old. She's figured out how to escape nets. She's figured out how to escape dynamite. She's figured out how to escape all of that stuff. But that's how fragile an animal like this actually is. And this is just one specimen that we've learned from, right? So there's a lot to listen to. There's a lot to learn from rivers. And the only way we can do it is by immersing ourselves in the river, literally. So with that, I think I'll leave it up to questions. And so we're a society. So please follow us on social media if you aren't already. WASI India. You can volunteer with us. You can donate to many of the projects that we work on. And also, since we're a society, you can also become a member and contribute to WASI directly. So I think, with that, maybe we can have a discussion around some of the things that Madhuri and I had spoken about.
Thank you so much, Naren, for this touching story, not only about Mara, but also telling us how important it is for us to listen. And what to listen, you also made it very clear. We'll quickly move on to get Khushbu Birawat on the conversation, and we will see what she has to say, because Khushbu today is going to be representing we, the citizen at large, in this whole idea of water. Before I invite Khushbu, once again, welcome back, Khushbu. Khushbu Birawat is an environmental engineer and consultant with over 7 years of experience in academia, environmental research, and geospatial analysis. Currently, she is working with Pani.earth Foundation to build geospatial maps and hydrological narratives that inform river basin management. Her work focuses on making critical water data accessible to communities, empowering evidence-based conservation and climate resilience. Her passion for continuous learning and commitment to bridging the gap between science and community actions have made her a strong advocate for data transparency and evidence-driven environmental solutions. So, Khushbu, thank you so much for joining us. And you heard both our speakers today. You also heard how important it is to listen, and how important for even common citizens to know what is there. And that is where the importance of how the data is presented. I mean, we just heard how Naren presented about the story of Mara, and I'm still having goosebumps about her life. It's extremely important how the data is given to the common people, especially the decision makers. What's your take on this, and how would you like to navigate both our speakers on this listening to the fragiles? Over to you, Khushbu. Please take it on from here.
Yeah. Thank you, Mansi. Thank you very much. So, more than me speaking, but as a citizen to both Naren and Madhuri, I have one question. If you were invited to a government meeting where they would tell you that please suggest one specific action for us to take and we will do you one wish, whatever you want to grant it, what would that be from your side? I like Madhuri to go first from the data perspective, which she brings at pani.earth. And Naren, you mentioned about the ecological indicators. So probably give us some examples of what are those ecological indicators the government could measure and collate frequently so that we have those indicators to take decisions on. Yes.
Yeah, I think from purely a data perspective, right? I think the voices of the work of people like Naren, WASI, and many other groups actually that work for the smooth coated otters, the different bee species that are there. I think we look at biodiversity as a separate thing, and projects as a separate thing. There's no common, I don't know, a database where when you're planning something, like first of all, existing projects, we don't know what already is there, like the 101 over, like when we were marking, I think they were, Kaveri is just fragmented all along. There's the last free flowing stretches only from Sangama to the Mekidatu stretch, basically, which they're trying to this thing block that too. So I feel we don't have a system where to even make informed decisions. Everything is just a political decision, or something for the farmers or something. But I feel like a database like that will be really useful, where you have all the projects marked, you have all of these habitats actually marked, saying these are no-go zones, actually you should not be doing this, or all this knowledge transferred into some kind of a decision-making system, I feel, because otherwise we all are working in silos.
Thank you, Madhuri. So what we take away from here is there is no cumulative impact assessment forum or a platform right now for the decision makers also to say go ahead with any of these projects. So what we are seeing, say in Western Ghats with these 5 megawatt power projects, hydropower projects, the cumulative effect of impact of it is also not there anywhere as such. Okay, thank you. Naren, so do you want me to repeat the question, Naren, or you'll go ahead?
No, I think I got you. So one was,
Thank you.
if I were to ask one thing of the government,
Yeah.
that's an interesting, very interesting question. I think what I would do is put them, or I would request them to acknowledge the rights of rivers, right? So rivers actually have rights globally and within India as well. Our constitution, for example, we're all bound, right? As Indians, we're all bound by a constitution. And I think Section 15A is the one that deals with, or makes it a constitutional duty of every single person to protect their environment and rivers. Rivers is specifically mentioned in that. So I think that's a very powerful tool that we could use to approach the government, or I would use to approach the government. And I would wish that they would listen or have a voice for that and make amends, because we have systems in place. It's just that they aren't informed, right? So, for example, we have e-flows are a major thing for rivers to maintain a flow of a river, because a river needs a flow to be a river, right? So e-flows are an important thing, and even in India right now, all dams they are mandated to release a certain amount of water for e-flow. But the problem is that is all done during the monsoon when there's excess flow. So these systems are in place, but they can be tweaked a bit. So I guess that would be my ask of the government. When it comes to bioindicators, it's tricky business because, again, I'm talking about it from a policy perspective, because unfortunately, ecology does not take the forefront in many of these cases, right? So even if you look at many of the PILs or many of the Supreme Court cases that have been there over the years, ecology generally takes a backseat, right? It's I mean, if you were to show an impact, what would have more of an impact, or some sort of human rights. So if there's a tribal community living there and they're going to be displaced, that would be more of a thing. So bioindicators are tricky business when it comes to be used at a policy level. But from a science perspective and from a monitoring perspective, yes, there are several bioindicators. The easiest ones are macroinvertebrates. That's generally what people look at first because they indicate a change, an immediate change in the ecosystem. But I honestly believe now in 10 years, having worked in this field, that you can't just focus on macroinvertebrates. You need to look at the some sort of a riparian index, as we call it now, which basically takes into account all the plants that you see on the side of the river, macroinvertebrates, fish assemblages, all of these into perspective. So from a purely ecological scientific perspective, I would look at it from that lens. But from an education perspective, of course, single macroinvertebrate species would like the dragonfly, for example, are definitely helpful. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but
It did in a way also explains why ecological indicators or running away from ecology is a form that we have seen in the government spaces or anywhere. Because I think at Pani, this year we are getting introduced to macroinvertebrates, and it is such a crazy learning for us. And like we being in this domain, this was something new for us. So how do we spread this knowledge, spread the word, and probably bring ecology in the forefront, which is also way, I think, cost-wise, we can also understand the pollution and the stress in a less costly affair rather than going through expensive lab test that we have to go through to get to know the pollution levels and contaminants. Yes, Naren, thank you very much. So I think one point which I liked is your flagship program of Mashi, taking it as a tiger of the Kaveri River Basin and spreading the word. And Madhuri, one more question that I would like to ask you is, does this data really inform any of the on-ground decisions? Have you taken up some, I mean, what is the impact of it? You're on mute.
Yeah. So I think the first step was like, people don't know that there were rivers in Bangalore, right? Like they were vehemently arguing with us saying there's nothing like that. And hence we need to depend on, the faraway Kaveri or Sharavati or Yatinhole. So I guess data has a role in terms of basic awareness. But I think we are hoping this year to actually engage with the government more. We're happy to share that they it seems there is a plan by our deputy chief minister to look at something, and hopefully we can share our learnings from Kham River actually that we saw in Aurangabad about how they went by with catchment level interventions rather than these large sewage treatment plants, large projects everywhere. It's like looking at catchment wise what's coming into the river, how do you stop it? But so hopefully we feel data can inform like hopefully we will be able to inform action and change things on ground this year. Because if you don't have data, right, what happens is that if I say clean a river, what does that mean? What are you asking for? You'll be thrown 100 mld, 200 mld, 500 mld as sewage treatment plants. But what about the ones that exist already? Are they working efficiently? Is there connectivity to the UGDs there? Why are you investing in more? We see on a dry day in Rishabhavati River, after the sewage treatment plants, about 560 mld of water flowing. Now, this is partially treated and untreated. Why do you have 500 mld flowing there if you have so many sewage treatment plants up there and if they're treating water and not reused in Bangalore? We always talk about sending it away to Kolar, different places. That's like that much less water from Kaveri, right? Which means that many less hydropower things needed actually. Because water pumping is not just about water extraction, right? It's also about the power needed, whether it's thermal, whether it's hydropower, to different things that we have. So it has an implication. Water's implication is footprint is quite high when for this thing. So I feel data does have a role, and we hope that informed the insights that we gather about analyzing how our STPs are working efficiently, whether a common effluent treatment plants make sense. To have a centralized one at one location where you're ferrying the, harmful effluents from one industrial area to another, giving a chance for the industrial area, the tanker to just dump it into a river. You have it free for all to dump it in there. So how do we kind of, start looking at this catchment wise and more methodically? We hope to make some change this year with the data.
So I think this brings me to a conclusion saying that yes, more informed citizenry is important, and that is possible through having the right kind of data and insights. And so whether it's ecological perspective that has to be brought in forefront, or moving the data that we already have to the government or the decision makers, both the angles are important. So yes, thank you, thank you, Madhuri and Naren, for answering my questions, and thank you, Mansi, for this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. Before I close with a vote of thanks, I also have very simple questions which I always hold back for the end. Madhuri, to you, because we are talking about listening, and there is an important way how to make people listen. So we are talking about people listening, right? People have to listen. Yeah. So there are many ways. We, as you know, we also do Monday munching. We also do Friday waters, and we are trying to see how different ways people are trying to convey these important messages. Like unless and until Naren had really told this entire story about Mara, I would not have been really so moved about that. It was just another fish. But giving an identity, giving a data to a situation, because as rightly mentioned by Khushbu also, and you also mentioned, moving water from place A to place B is just not moving water. And when we talk about dams, when we talk about moving upstream like Bombay, Hyderabad, all the cities, Ahmedabad is getting water from so far. We are not only moving water, we are moving life. We are moving lives of many of these people, of which only Naren narrated one story. Now it has become a story and history because she is no more. So, I'm just curious to understand how important it is not only to produce data, which is you are dedicating your life for data transparency, but how that data is comprehended or conveyed. First of all, conveyed to people who are making decisions, because you and I are not in the decision-making situation. What will be the more impactful way? Because numbers are not telling the story of Mara. That's the thing.
Yes.
Even if we say there are 1,000 types of fish, it's still not telling the problem. What do you think that where do we head from here, especially when these big decisions, large infrastructure, river projects, do not include biologists, do not include ecologists. I am not against engineer. You and I both come from engineering background. How do we get engineers with heart? With ears, because today we are talking about listening. So what are the tools within the data? Storytelling is one tool, which I will say the Naren's last part was storytelling about a life. What do you think? Where do we go from here?
Yeah. So I think firstly, Naren, thank you for sharing the story of Mara. I think that has to be told to many in Bangalore. I think the story has to go out a bit more widely, actually, shared more widely. So one of the things that we discovered this year, right, like as we shared, when we put out, scientific facts out there, right, people don't connect with it. They connect with stories.
That's the thing. Yes.
So that has been one of our efforts with that By the River effort, right, which we were doing, where we sit by the river and actually share stories of how, and that's mostly human stories, but there's also the wildlife thing. So I feel that we would like to actually, see if we can collaborate even with WASI, like, or Naren, just understand, that how do we bring out these stories along the river where it's more than water. That's the theme that we want to focus on, bring
Absolutely.
forward.
River is
So
just not
you
water.
especially place it where because you can never correlate a project to Mara's death, right? it is like, KRS dam release, which we have to talk about, but you can't say it is this hydropower project or this one, because it's nice to know they're resilient, but I wouldn't want to share that story so much, Naren, because I'm so concerned that people will say, okay, yeah, if they can manage, let's push it even more
Mm-hmm.
to the
Yeah,
brink.
especially when the water, yes,
So,
and she
so I
was
think
completely deceived. She was deceived with the monsoon condition. It was not monsoon.
yes, yes. And I think
Mm,
we have to do that actually, going forward, that these stories have to become more louder, actually,
Yeah.
because people do connect with these stories. So I would reach out to Naren and, actually, like, where you place, because I'm sure there are many stories we collect of all these people who work on ground, of, give a name. You've already given a name, Mara, but I'm sure many of them, where they follow a particular species. Like, we live in a community where people follow snakes, and they actually identify the snake and they've given it a name. They can recognize it when they see it. So I feel that these stories have to get louder, where the voices of the river are more than just, saying water for you, actually. So I would say storytelling in different ways, whether
yeah.
it's actually being by the river. I would like people, it's not just WASI as a, as volunteers, right? We should be coming to the river otherwise too. Why is
And
it not
Otherwise,
part of,
and
why is
that's sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm actually right now in Germany because my son is here, and I came here and I'm looking at, how people come to the river. Keep looking at the life there. They just spend time by the river. So why is it not a norm? Like, we just, wildlife is just tiger when you go to the safari. Show me
mm-hmm.
the big cat. Nothing less than that.
That's also
So
for
I think we
recreation,
have
not
to have
for
that shift.
any.
And so,
Mm,
I'll answer the question Khushbu asking, if you have that one wish from the government, that I have hope in children. And I think schools have to change. This
mm,
thing of, kids have to spend more time with Naren, looking at certain things. Only then, will this change. Because I don't have hope in adult humans anymore, in sense of, we are struggling to listen to each other. So forget about listening to
mm,
the fragile. But I have hope in children, so it's important, because this is going to take, this mess is decades long. It's not going to get fixed today, right? So it needs that
mm,
connect to the river and the ecosystems to be established. So I feel this has to, ecology program has to be instilled right from kindergarten in kids. Bioassessment is part of the school program in Germany, is what I learned. Why is it
mm.
not part of our culture, like, of our schooling and education? So I think that's one wish that I will ask somebody to grant, saying, why can't it be part of schooling? So Naren, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you.
and
Naren, you
yeah.
had a very important message for me, and also it clicked me later on. You mentioned that large species, they may look large, but actually they go first in the whole cycle. And then I started thinking, yes, because their number is less probably, and but when we look at animals on the land, tiger becomes a superhero, and I love tigers. We all love tigers, but then we look at tigers and elephants where somewhere we go and we get entertained ourselves. Somehow for fishes, we don't go and entertain ourselves, and they also become they get lesser priority amongst us. If I just talk about fishes versus animals, or not that to compete with them, in this kind of setting where fish, the identity of being fish or fishes itself is at stake, because for us it is either for consumption, or we don't have any bequest and intrinsic value assigned to them, whether they live or don't live. It is not directly giving me an optional value. You know what I mean? I mean, if there is a tiger and elephant, I go and see it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that in that sense, I feel the life below earth is more vulnerable than life on land. Sorry, life below water is more vulnerable than life on land. In this kind of situation, I come back to you again. How do we even create stories for small creatures when we could see that big fish carried by 4 people, 5 people, huh? So there's a mass which we could see. And if you recall, you started with that little animal, huh? The fly, dragonfly, in Madhuri's case. So we are talking about a range of species.
Yeah.
So, and it is beyond human scope to keep telling stories about everybody. I mean, for every species. Where do we stand here today? I mean, probably it's a very good idea to take Mara's story to schools. As rightly pointed out, we have to have hopes to sensitize them.
So-
Then I still think about the dragonfly. She doesn't have a story.
There is a children's book that came out, I think from Chennai somewhere. I think it was Yuvan. There's a nature educator, Yuvan. So he brought out a story about a dragonfly. So there is a story about a dragonfly. No, but beyond that, Mansee, I think so. Yes, we need a combination of both things, right? Because humans are innately emotional beings, and to capture a person's attention, you need to tap into that emotional angle. So I do think, yes, stories like Mara or a story about a dragonfly are important to have. But more importantly, in the long run, I think it's very important for us, and Madhuri mentioned it as well, for us to have safe places where people can interact with animals or nature or whatever it might be. And this is, we've been talking about this for I think 20, 30 years now. I remember my adults when I was a little kid saying the same thing. Now, I was fortunate enough to be able to experience this, right, my entire life. And I ended up making a career out of it. The first time my parents took me camping, I was 2 years old. And in the same spot that's behind me, actually. I still have it on my screen.
Wow.
And that built such a connection, right, that I ended up making a career out of it. So, yeah, 100% the youth have to be tapped in on, right? So we need to expose them in a safe way. Not, like when you take them to that, to the Srirangapatna Ghat and there's a, garbage mess over there and it's hot and the only place you can go to is the Mayura Hotel. No? I'm saying, take them to a place where there is no hotel, there's no internet, no cell phone, nothing. In a safe manner, right? The forest department has the resources to do it. NGOs are available for knowledge exchange and all of these things. So there has to be some sort of a nature immersion experience to actually hook on to people. So one thing at WASI, and we've been very lucky, and this is a reason why I hold WASI in such high regard, is that for the last 50 years, from 1972 onwards, this is exactly what they've done. Right? They try to find ways in which people can interact with nature, live in nature, stay out there. At one point, we had leased out 22 kilometers of the Kaveri River in the Kaveri Wildlife Sanctuary, one of the most wildest places I've been to. And you could go there and camp for a week or two with your family, right? And there were situations, of course, this was Veerappan area at that point. Veerappan used to, we'll have word that he came across the river, he was on the other side, and then he move on. All these kind of things. These sort of spaces are now gone. Now, if you want to experience nature, it's either the safari or you go for some walk somewhere where, the information is not available to you. So we should definitely, I mean, it's our responsibility as NGOs, as scientists, data gatherers, and this is where the data comes in, because you can't be selling half-baked stories, because kids are super inquisitive. Now, you can't, I'm sure they would have had a lot more questions about Mara, right? How do you know Mara died, right? How do you know she wasn't killed by a crocodile? All those questions come in because they're so curious. And that's why data is important. And that's where that plugs in, right? So if we have our bases covered, if we know what the story is, if we're clear on what we want to do, create a safe space, I think that's the way forward for us. And it's not something that'll happen overnight. It takes time, but you just got to stay committed, I think.
And it is neither a rocket science that it cannot be done. So that's most important, that it is doable if we want. And that is where listening becomes extremely important. And I think for me, the key takeaway today is actually stories are important to move people, but they need to be backed by good science and data, which is transparent. But at the same time, data and good data is not moving people. So it needs to be backed by some stories where data can make more impact on, especially on decision making people we are talking, but also if we want to build a future cadre of people who are more sensitive than my generation people towards nature. I think we have to completely have a different education system. But it is also important that in water sector, even in large projects and rivers and all, still biologists, ecologists are not part of the main committee which decides about the life of river. Because river for us, again, it is all about human consumption, whether we go to see tiger or whether we make a use of a river, it's just for us, for consumption. Somewhere we have to start realizing that the planet is a home to many species other than humans, and we are not the elite species to be entertained by others and not the only elite species to consume others. We are actually going to start the biodiversity series season 2, which we did earlier with Saki Waters. So Saki Waters is coming back with us, and we will start again the biodiversity series and talk about many, many more species. But I also wish to inform all our viewers that we are also actually having a discussion on the India's primeval wetland forest Mistrika with Steve Lockett on July 16th, Wednesday. And we are going to take this whole discussion even further to look at the swamp life. And for this week, we have Friday Water series. And as we talked today, that data needs stories and story needs data. We are extremely delighted that we are actually running a series with Living Waters Museum. And this Friday, 23rd May, we are having Goa Water Stories Part 2, where we are going to hear some young scholars, how they have really gathered data and made a story out of it and presented it in a very beautiful way in Goa Water Stories. That's on Friday, 23rd of May at 5 p.m. IST. All the information about our sessions are always on the website, www.w4w.in. Do join us. Do look at our YouTube channel. And I'm extremely sorry for the invasion of both today in our session. We will try to rectify it and make sure that it doesn't happen again. So a big apology to my speakers for the problem, and we'll make sure that it doesn't take place again. I'm extremely sorry for this, Naren. I can't really help about it. Yeah, thank you.
No.
And Madhuri. Yeah, thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Take care.